revenue ops for us is really about kind of formalizing how we go to market and how we align our teams.
So what's your revenue ops philosophy? And rather than taking me through your CV, which is a very common question, how about we just look at how Amanda's life has impacted what that philosophy is?
Yeah, that's a good way to frame it. I mean, I think my view of revenue ops and how it impacts me and the organization that I work for, BusinesSolver, is we revenue ops for us is really about kind of formalizing how we go to market and how we align our teams. So we have been a very fast-paced growth organization in the 11 years that I've been with the team. And so everything's done very well intended, but we've never been great about formally documenting things and being consistent about that. And so really my world within revenue operations and formally taking over the team is how do we drive a lot of that consistency. So a lot of the direction has come from different team members over the years, whether it's different sales leaders, marketing leaders, our C-suite. And now it's about bringing alignment to all of those different areas. So that's my world, and what revenue operations for me is, making sure that everyone knows where to go, where they can find information, whether it's in our CRM, if it's working with our engagement team, our sales engagement team, and how they're training, and just driving alignment. I think that's my big goal for 2021 is how do we start documenting things consistently and communicating it well, and then just driving alignment across all of our different teams. And that's really my world, especially for 2021. And those are some of the goals that I've put in place with my team and as a leadership team of how can we incrementally start working towards those things, whether it's around reporting, process documentation, all of that. It's really maturing our organization there and driving alignment. So that's kind of it in a nutshell of what my world looks like from revenue ops, especially for this year.
Yeah, that's really cool. Basically getting everyone to work towards the same goal, which even in something, data-led like reporting is still a really human sport at the top level. So talk to me about the fundamental ways you're driving the communication between the different revenue teams, stakeholders, silo leads.
Yeah, so the way that we're driving communication is one, starting with, meetings or different forums that already exist. Because I have found in my history, at least, within our team, is that when we try to, break off and say, okay, we're going to have this type of meeting to do something different, it can get confusing. And so I think the first step into kind of creating alignment with the teams is kind of tacking on to the structure that already exists. So I think of like our leadership meetings, the sales team meetings, it's tacking on to those things and making it part of the regular dialogue in there. So whether it's process rollout, updates on reporting, or updates on comp plans or things like that, where you use those forums and you drive some consistency in that cadence of discussions that you're having, and things that you want to roll out. So people then start to expect it as part of those regularly scheduled meetings. And now that we've been fully virtual for almost a year, it's actually provided more forums to do that, because we're used to just meeting this way, where before we maybe would have delayed it because we wanted everyone to be together in person. Where now it's a lot easier to just schedule a meeting or to tack onto something that already exists, because we're having more of those virtual meetings. So that's really been my focus on kind of rolling things out is leveraging things that are in place, but then becoming part of the regular dialogue. So people expect it and they, they're waiting for it. They're excited about it.
Yeah. I want to pick up two words you said there, being expectation and consistency.
Yeah.
So as you know, the new VP, what by the end of 2021, it sounds like you want to build this thing where people turn up, they know what to expect, they know what's going on, there's a structure, and there's a plan. How do you build that as like a baseline, everyone as a baseline cultural idea that everyone buys into? How are you going about starting that off now?
Yeah, I think, well, what's exciting for us too is we have some other new leadership in the organization. So um, it's about putting our plans together and then communicating those cohesively. So it's documenting first, here are the things that we realistically think by quarter. So here are our OKRs for each quarter and how do they all tie together? So it's historically, we haven't been good about communicating those. We may say them in smaller circles, but we don't necessarily broadly communicate them. So it's starting there so that as we start to slowly roll out some of the changes or enhancements to our processes or however you want to frame it, we can tie them back to goals that we've communicated. So it's, okay, we know we want improved forecasting as an example. Here are here's kind of the timeline and here are the things that we are doing to get there. And so it's posting those things in a place where people can see them, but then it's also just regularly communicating it around, here are the actual goals and here are the specifics of it. Because I think it's easy to talk about high level goals of like, oh, we want improved reporting. It's like, well, what does that mean? And what can we actually accomplish by quarter or even by like month, so that we can consistently like work towards something, but we also set the right expectation that here are the goals. So if you're talking about something that maybe doesn't align to them, do we need to pivot, or is it something that maybe isn't as high a priority that just doesn't align to where we need to focus our efforts this quarter or that quarter. So I think it's a lot of that. And helping with a lot of the new leadership that we have in place. It makes it an easy conversation because people, when there's new leadership in place, they're expecting kind of a change in goals and priorities. And so that's helped facilitate some of those conversations with, it's like, I'm not the only new person in the role, somebody else. We have a new CRO that I'm reporting into. We've had some promotions and movement within the organization and other sales leadership roles. So that certainly helps too.
Yeah, that's really cool. So it sounds like this is an environment, like you said, where there's lots of new people, new ideas, and a new objective to get everyone together.
Yes.
But of course, it's really natural. This is change management, right? It's really natural in
Yes.
any change management where you do get some resistance to some degree. That happens every single time.
Yep.
So how do you balance this new vision whilst taking people with you who have maybe been there before and they have certain ideas about what the past looked like? How do you convince them of what the future should be on a human to human level?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it is actually bringing people along and asking for their opinions on things. So I'm fortunate in stepping into this role that I have been with the organization for a long time. So I have relationships where I can just, get on a call and ask their opinion. Like, tell me what you're concerned about. Tell me, how would you go about doing it? And so I think a lot of it is just people want to be heard. They don't want to have things dictated to them, especially, I think of the different teams that I'm working with, whether it's finance or legal or our implementation team, like all of those different areas of the business that are impacted by revenue ops, sales ops, however you frame it. They want to be heard, first of all. And for me personally, I think that's the only way revenue ops is going to be successful is if you're bringing everybody along. So the first way that I've tried to tackle that is just having conversations with people and asking them, like, what does ideal state look like for you? And in an ideal world, what do you need from my team? What would you expect to get from our team? And it's starting there with those conversations. And a lot of times it will frame and help you pivot whatever that strategy is. So I can come to my leadership meetings and say, I did sit down with legal, I sat down with workforce planning, I sat down with these teams. These are the things that they said, and here are the things that I think we can take from it that are, that would be valuable or worthwhile to adjust in the strategy. And that way, when you go to roll out a new process or you have new reporting or whatever, it's not a surprise. Like they're like, yeah, I can see the things that you took from whatever I gave you. So it's finding a balance between having those conversations and bringing people along, but then also having that influence it, because I don't have all the right answers. So I view my role as helping bring everyone together so that we all know we're working towards the same goal. So it's just bringing people along and communicating that.
Yeah, fantastic. And absolutely, you've been there at 10 years, which is one of the reasons I was so keen to speak to you. Now let's take a real life example, and I'm going to use forecasting because I think that does entwine with process and adoption, because that has to work for forecasting to work, and it does work with alignment, right? Because we pull in different teams and leaders for that. So you said today you wanted to get more consistent with forecasting. What does that look like for you, and what's your plan on getting there?
Yeah. So, I mean, we have forecast reports in our CRM today, but really where we need to get more consistent is like by definition of, forecasting an opportunity of, is this one that is, whatever, everyone uses different terminology, but whether it's a best case opportunity or most likely, I've seen high, medium, low, there's, different rating structures on how you forecast it. By our different sales segments, we haven't been as consistent historically. So we're kind of taking it back to step one in terms of just defining if you're forecasting this opportunity and putting some rigor around the definition of different stages that we use, the different forecasting terms that we're using, and then the dates and what's realistic around receiving a vendor of choice date or, getting a signed contract. We just haven't been as consistent historically about that. So that's really where I'm starting, is in our leadership calls with the sales leaders, is talking about, well, here's what we think this should mean, have some dialogue around it, and then adjusting whether we need to adjust it in our CRM or if we just need to do training around, here's what these different stages or these different forecasting terms you mean, so that we're consistent as an organization. So when we go to our executive leaders or to our board of directors, like everything is the same and it's not different by segment, because that's historically we've been a little siloed across our segments. And so that's really where I'm starting, is let's just all align on what these things mean so that we're consistent in our reporting. And then, I feel good about the reporting that we have in place, but we could be better. We could start reporting on different things. So I've been working closely with our CRM team on, the different dashboards that we're building out, the different reports that we have, just how can we augment those so that they align with some of the other things that we want to track, because it's all there. It's just about bringing it together.
Yeah. Okay. So that's really cool, right? Because we talked about the top level and the silo leads, but this is going right down to the rep now, right? And like their lead definition. And it sounds like there's a handover from the strategy you're putting in place to the tactical, it's the execution. Talk to me about how you handle that key handover, how you make that successful.
Yeah, so we've been putting in some consistent like pipeline and forecasting discussions where a lot of the same people are on there. So whether it's our CRO, our sales leaders, the sales consultants. And so the way that we are really rolling it out is just to drive some rigor around those conversations, like the timing. Historically, we weren't consistent in how we had forecasting calls or pipeline discussions with the sales consultants. So step one is just, how do we make it part of our consistent cadence so that we're used to having those conversations on a weekly, bi-weekly basis, so that it's just part of our natural dialogue around different opportunities. And So that's really where we're starting, especially this quarter, is driving some consistency around that so that people are just used to it. It's part of the everyday vernacular then, where it just hasn't been in the past. And it's not that we weren't doing it before, it's just driving a different type of rigor and consistency around it that hasn't historically been there.
Yeah, okay. So it's almost the theme of this interview, isn't it? It's about creating a cultural shift and how to make that work.
Yeah, I think the cultural shift is, we all know that data is important, that being consistent is important. Those things are easy to say, but we just haven't been focused on those in a way that we really are trying to focus on them for 2021. And I think the nice thing for us is that 2020 was a wild year, for everything, right? It completely changed forecasting with COVID and how buyers were buying, how we were just shifting from a workforce management. I mean, there were so many things to tackle that, at least for us culturally, 2021 is where people feel like they're craving some sort of normalcy, whatever that means. And so they want the consistency, and they're wanting to almost be not told like, this is what we're going to do, but we just shifted so many strategies and so many things in 2020 to try to, manage being fully virtual, not traveling for sales opportunities anymore. I mean, we were definitely heavily driven that way, where we were traveling all the time and shifting that way. So now 2021, it's like, okay, we're figuring out like what it's like to sell in a fully virtual environment. And so now that we've got, the last few quarters under our belts of figuring it out, people want it in 2021. So that cultural shift, I don't think will be as hard, because the sense I'm getting from all my conversations are people want that. They just want to know what it's going to look like. And they want to feel like it's consistent. So I think we have that helping us as we're driving some of this change.
Yeah, absolutely. People want to plan, right? People want to step
Yes,
forward.
they do. They do. And last year, it's like, understandably so, the plans literally shifted as you're learning, right? You're going through a sales process fully virtual, where before we would maybe go on site like several times, and you'd take a whole team, and our buyers are trying to figure out what's going on with their budgets, what's happening with their processes. And so it was a lot of learning. And now it's like, okay, let's take those learnings and actually put them into some formalities for 2021, which is exciting.
That's amazing. Okay, Amanda, if you're in a room full of rev ops and sales ops heroes, like the Justice League of these people, what would you ask them?
Ooh, that's a good question. I mean, I think I would want to understand how it's getting the buy-in. I'm not going to say this the right way. It's a really good question though. How do you ensure that it's truly a partnership between, I'd say, sales leaders and, salespeople by nature are not like process focused. And so how do you create a culture where people are craving everything that revenue ops is putting out there? There's a true partnership. And I feel like we're starting to do that really well, but I would love to know how people do that, where it doesn't feel like there's any friction. It's truly for this ship to like hit our quotas and achieve all the things we want to achieve. How do you really have that strong partnership? And I'd love to hear, other people's perspective on what they've been able to do. Because I have ideas on what we're doing, and I think it's moving us in the right way, but I would love to hear that from other people, about what's worked for them.
Yeah. Okay, Amanda, that's awesome. We'll end the interview there.